Shall we begin? Let's begin now. Let's begin now.
This is not a drill.
Repeat, this is not a drill.
Shall we begin?
Where are we? I got it. Here we are, everybody. Welcome back to the show, everybody. Craig Pasta Jardula here, Pasta to Go, coming off the Homeless Lev show not too long ago. Jamie, I know you're in the backgrounds there. I want to welcome Cheese Slice to the show today. I want to make sure that my microphone is working clearly. It seems like it is. We are waiting for our guest, Derrick Broze. He should be with us shortly, hopefully. If he didn't get held up, I am your host, like I said, Craig Pasta Jardula. Of course, my partner in crime, the guy I've been doing a lot of shows with, boots on the ground, that sort of thing. We were together in Chicago at the Democratic National Convention, not so much inside the theatrics convention itself, but out in the streets, getting the opinions and the sense of urgency from those people who are marching for those who are fighting for survival in Gaza. Ladies and gentlemen, you know him, you love him. He's got the same haircut as the last American vagabond. Matt Weinglass is with us today.
Hey, Craig, back in action. Thanks for having me back over here. We just did the crossover, so I'm loving it. I'm loving it. We're continuing the conversation. Thanks for having me back on.
Well, it looks like we might have to continue the conversation without our guest unless he shows up anytime soon. Hopefully he will. Ladies and gentlemen, Derrick Broze is supposed to be with us today to talk about the Sean Puffy Combs or the P. Diddy. I don't know which way you refer to him. I'm going with P. Diddy because it takes up less space now in our titles, and we're only limited to 100 titles on that YouTube. Thank you to those who are watching on the YouTube. Do us a favor, like, share, get it out there. Same thing if you're on the Rumble. I don't believe we're on the Rumble today. Oh, I didn't get the Rumble thing up in time because I had new things going on. So I didn't get the Rumble up today, but we do have the Convo Couch on the Rockfin. We have the Twitters going. I believe your Twitter is rolling right now. I just got
our Twitter. We have our Rumble up right now. I just crossed it over from our show. Perfect. So we're good.
Well, I shared the Homeless Left Twitter. So we're in my personal Twitter, the Homeless Left's Twitter. What is left right nowadays? That's a good question. We have to talk about that. There's a lot of things. But let's just get into what I have over here with the first tweet. You have something to bring to the table, don't you? A video or anything, or no? On Sean Puffy Combs.
Yeah, I got some stuff on. I got some stuff on Diddy for sure. Do you want me to
grab some stuff? Let's bring it ready and let's get it ready because let me read. Like I said, we were going to have Derrick Broze on today and talk about this. This is from Derrick Broze. He tweeted this the other day. Sean Puffy Combs turns himself in to New York authorities for charges of sex trafficking and racketeering. On Monday night, hip-hop mogul Sean Diddy Combs was arrested at the Park Hyatt Hotel in Manhattan and taken into custody by Homeland Security investigations. On Tuesday, Combs pleaded not guilty to charges while prosecutors argued he is a danger and should not be allowed out on bail. Combs was charged with 3 counts: racketeering, conspiracy, sex trafficking, and transportation to engage in prostitution. The indictment states, for decades, Sean Puffy Combs, a.k.a. Puff Daddy, a.k.a. P. Diddy, a.k.a. Diddy, a.k.a. PD, a.k.a. Love, oh my Lord, the defendant abused, threatened, and coerced women and others around him to fulfill his sexual desires, protect his reputation, and conceal his conduct. To do so, Combs relied on the employees' resources and influence of multifaceted businesses, empires that led and controlled, creating a criminal enterprise whose members and associates engaged in and attempted to engage in, among other crimes, sex trafficking, forced labor, kidnapping, arson, bribery, and obstruction of justice. Dun, dun, dun. Diddy and his associates are also accused of hosting freak-off sex parties at hotels. I never got invited to any of those. Diddy allegedly kept videos he took of his victims engaging in sex acts, sometimes without their knowledge. And the indictment states he allegedly used those videos to extort control over his victims. Read the indictment here. Wow, that is a lot to fulfill. That is a lot of questions that need to be answered. This is kind of confusing. The last time I think we did a video, we were questioning. I don't know if you were with us, Matt. I believe it was me, Fiorella, and Nico House. And the question was, well, Puff Daddy, P. Diddy, aka Love, Sean Combs, all the other names, blah, blah, blah. Will he be thrown to the wolves by the elites, or will he be protected by the elites? If you've been following any of this Epstein style trafficking of sorts, you'll know that they don't necessarily want to go after those in powers. I believe the Netflix video of Epstein painted Epstein as a bad apple, a bad seed. Matt, it seems like the same thing is apparent over here. They're trying to paint him as the bad apple, the bad seeds. I think they've learned from their past where a lot of people say, wow, Jeffrey Epstein was, or Ghislaine Maxwell was the first person to be charged with trafficking children to no one. In other words, nobody on the client list went to jail. Nobody got arrested. Nobody was found guilty. It looks like that this time they're going to throw some people to the wolves. I guess the question being answered that was asked is, are the elites going to protect Puffy Combs, or are they going to throw him to the wolves? No, it looks like they're going to throw him to the wolves, and it looks like they're going to name some co-conspirators that they don't care about and let him go down with them to make it look like we're still a land of laws and truth and justice. My friend Matt Weinglass, what do you have to say to that mouthful I just spat out right there?
Well, I mean, there's a lot there, but I think we got to take a step back and remember how the American people, the generation of cell phones in your hand, the 3-second sound bites, the 3-minute attention spans, we've all been conditioned these last several years to pinpoint who the bad guy is and let them fall so the rest of us can get back to life as usual. That's the mindset going into this. We've seen this countless times. Of course, we can talk about the Jeffrey Epstein comparison. There's a lot there. There's a lot to unpack. But let's look at the larger the mindset of where you have like a Harvey Weinstein, or you have a Bill Cosby, or I'm doing a little of the Me Too movement stuff, but it's the same stuff involved. Or we can even go to we can even go to Black Lives Matter and say Derek Chauvin. It's always the one character that they come up with to take the fall. That's all that needs to happen. That person was sick and twisted. None of us saw it coming. We were in the room with him, but we had no idea what he was up to in the other room. I would have said something. So we see this playbook every time. Now, this time's a little different than like a Weinstein, little different than a Cosby, little different. In this regard, yes, I think you're right, Pasta. He's definitely going to be taking some people down with him. The only question really to ask is, who are they going to allow him to take down? And they're going to be, I think, as you alluded to, they're going to be the people that aren't as valuable enough to the elite. So, but they might look valuable to us. I mean, it might be somebody like a Jay-Z or a Beyonce. I know that's aiming a little high there, but how valuable, maybe they've run their course. Maybe their value has run their course too. P. Diddy's value has run its course. That's why he's in the position he's in. They're done with him. They're spitting them out. So now, unless he goes and starts running his mouth about people that you're not allowed to touch, then we might see something different. We might see a little suicidal tendencies all of a sudden. But
he might Epstein himself.
Yeah. It might. I mean, you never know. It can kind of hit us out of nowhere. We can just get that feeling of I want to end it all, and it just happens sometimes to the best of us, or the worst of us. But
you said it best, though. I think they might want to just decide that he doesn't have any value to them anymore, right? I always thought that this is always about, like, look, when people have talked about why Donald Trump, why is he still kept alive, right? Well, there's going to be some argument, though. They're trying to kill him now. Whole nother argument. There was this kind of mentality of thoughts when you hear the words "dead man switch," right? Like, what are they holding that they have over somebody else? Like, I always believed that the raiding of Puff Daddy's homes wasn't necessarily to go out and find evidence against him. It was to find the evidence that was going to be used against the elites that he was holding over their shoulders. So I think that was what we see is a lot of these things. It's not like a interrogation into an investigation to find evidence. It's to find the evidence that's being used to held against those in power that they're going to necessarily cleanse. I believe we saw a lot of that with all of Mayor Adams' cabinets and his people close to him in New York last week, as they raided, it was 2 weeks ago, I believe, when they raided a lot of homes of people close to Mayor Adams. You know what I'm saying? They always want to see, it's the theater, the kabuki theater, that make you think that they're upholding our values, the truth and law, truth and justice, the human rights values. No, they're really looking for what evidence in this day is held against the elites? What does Puff Daddy have that the elites that he can use against the elites? What did Jeffrey Epstein have which he can use against the elites? What does Donald Trump have that he's holding over the heads over the elites and why they won't kill him, right? Like, that's what a lot of people think, and I think we have to think somewhere in between when we see these situations. But I can tell you this much, Matt, the same way you'll hear people talk about, oh my God, look at Harvey Weinstein that you just mentioned, how he gets away with murder, but Bill Cosby, as black, he gets thrown in jail. You're going to hear those comparisons where people are saying the only reason why he didn't get the Epstein treatment and got away with it for so long, because Epstein had like decades of charges lobbied against him. It was back in the, I believe in the early 90s, late 80s, they had cases against Epstein in Florida and whatnot, but he got away with it for so long. They're going to say the same thing because of his race. That is why they're deciding to take Puffy Daddy down. Even amongst the oligarchs and the elites, racism exists, Matt, and you're going to hear that argument.
It's such. Well, I don't know. I mean, I think we're over this thing about this. Once you get to a certain level of wealth, and yeah, he is a puppet. They're all puppets of something larger. But the race thing, I think we're over it. It's not like Bill Cosby did something and then they took him down right away. He had protection too. He got to exist in this realm of good father. I'm bringing the good feelings back to what an African American family is supposed to be like, the principles and the etiquette and the family value. The whole time he was drugging the women. He joked about it on his comedy. He was being protected. So if people start playing the race card on this, I think they're living in a time where we've already beyond that. We understand. I think the American people are smart enough now to understand that there's people with privileges in this country, that people that don't have to follow the same rules. And I think Obama's presidency might have started inspiring us to start thinking of that now, that there's people that just get protection. When they're done with you, they're done with you. And that's it. So with Diddy, they're done with him now. So who's he going to take down? Okay. Oh, well, looks like we're having the issue there. Am I okay? Or am I freezing up? Am I good?
Oh, you're good. You're not freezing up on our side, so.
Okay.
Dude, there are gremlins
okay.
galore today. Gremlins galore with everything going on. It's been nuts. Craziness.
Yeah.
You got something you want to play? You said that you might want to share with the show, but it looks like that our guest, I don't know, he's MIA. So we're just the show must go on. It's a shame because Derrick Broze got some great stuff he's got going on. I really want to talk about. He was also going to be going to the UN Summit for the Future summit. It's the Summit for the Future, sponsored by the UN in New York. He's on his way to go there as well, and I wanted to talk a lot about that because it really does tie in the bigger picture of what's going on. I mean, I think a lot more people understand. I think they've taken it beyond this whole deep state trying to take down Donald Trump. It's like, wait a second. People have recognized there's a ruling class that sits above all the nation states that's dictating what to go on, and they want to make sure that we are track and traced, we are censored, we are watched. They control the narratives. They make sure everything's going on. They don't want anything out of their control. They send their little minions, their stenographers, like the Gavin Newsoms, to do their dirty work. And that's what we're facing nowadays. And it ties in to this whole Puff Daddy situation, who he's worked for, how he was, made to be bigger than life, larger than life. There are so many things right now I think about with Biggie Smalls that I didn't think about back then that I think about now, and how Puff Daddy could have played a part. Please, what do you got to bring to the table there, sir?
Okay. So I want to go back in time a little, because on Twitter we've seen since the arrest, we've seen a lot of people digging up old videos of P. Diddy, and I think it's always important to go look at context, look at some of the slip ups, look at some of the alignments he had, some of the big names. There's this one going around with him and Obama, and we understand that he was a mouthpiece for the Democratic Party so long. I remember working for the Democratic Party in 2004, and P. Diddy was a major mouthpiece for the John Kerry campaign. After that, he was a big part. Obama had alignment with him. He was a voice for the hip hop community that reached so many people at the time. So he was definitely a tool. He was being used as a tool. So there's people that are controlling him above this that are not going to be mentioned in this court at all. The people above him. So that's who we're alluding to. So I'm going to show two things. One is, first, let's look at a list of people that just they stepped down within 24 hours of Diddy's arrest. So this, and again, I'm not going to say, that this is directly connected. We don't know. We have to look at each one of these individually, but this is one that just to look at the timeline, I think it's important. So let's look at some of the people right now that have stepped down in the 24 hours since his arrest. So you have, and these are all music Mongols, okay? And you can look them up. A lot of them are Jewish. Doesn't matter. I'm not saying it matters one way or the other. But we do know there's certain people that hold positions in the music industry in Hollywood. But you guys can look them up for yourself and get a whole biography on them. But you got a music executive, Kevin Liles. You got Eric Pryor. He was the president of Fine Arts. You got Jonathan Holloway, Rutgers president. You got Robert B. Davis as a general manager of Martha's Vineyard. Interesting. You got a bunch of different types of people on this list. Chris Cameron, lacrosse coach, Kathy Newsom, Newsham, City Bay mayor, LaMonica
New York City councilman. I mean, it's just crazy.
This is crazy. Doctors and executive directors, CEOs. Man, this is insane. So these are just the people in the 24 hours. And I've seen some of them come up since this post. So this is just looking at the people who stepped down. Again, could be a total coincidence. Who knows? But I suggest everybody out there do your own work on this. As we said, the new term for our time is do your own research. It's not a joke, guys, because a lot of this stuff disappears. We were covering this on the Homeless Left earlier, that you have to capture this stuff. Ian Carroll, he talks about this a lot as an independent media guy, that you have to sometimes grab this stuff before it's gone. In this case, you could definitely look up each of these people on your own if you'd like. But this is stuff we have to do our own work. The media is not going to be putting this stuff out. So just look at the connections. Look at the people that are getting out of the limelight right now. People in power that you don't generally see on camera as much as the entertainers, because they're the face, right? They put out there, but they're still being controlled by something bigger than that. As I mentioned, Obama. I mentioned these other people. So, Craig, I just want to share one more thing before you chime in here, because I want to put that up. This goes back to where I started from here on this talk. We're talking about historical context. So there's a lot of videos going around. I suggest everybody look up some of these. Look up Obama talking about P. Diddy. Look up his interactions. There's an Ashton Kutcher one. There's an Ashton Kutcher where he's giving away that these parties, these freak out parties, were not very good memories. You can see the look on his faces. So look at the context of people talking about P. Diddy over the years. He was an icon for many decades. I mean, this goes way back early 2000s. I'm going to play one, and this is just one example. Watch the look on his face when he's on a interview with Jimmy Kimmel. Watch their conversation. This is just for context. Let's see what's being talked about here in this interview when he's talking about the political landscape. It's just this one kind of caught my eye. So I want to get your feedback on it. Here we go.
Yeah, absolutely.
You could be president. Do you ever think about anything like that?
No.
Really, never?
No. I'll make a good president.
You don't think you'd be good?
I wouldn't really pass any of the things that you have to, but I guess Trump did it.
Yeah, no.
No.
you would be a Boy Scout like a
Yeah. Nah, I like doing what I'm doing.
You like doing yeah. There's no fun in that, is there?
I don't know if I could be responsible for the whole country.
You know what? I think that at this point, almost anybody would be doing a better job.
What about you?
Yeah, and I wouldn't do a better job, but I think I would. You know what? I would, if you agreed to run for president, I would be happy to be your running mate. Let's put it that way. All right.
Ladies and gentlemen, he is a journalist, filmmaker, author, aggregate of he's also a conscious rapper. I love that. I haven't heard him flow yet. He's the founder of the Conscious Resistance Network, the co-founder of the Freedom Cell Network, and the Greater Reset Activation. He also has another great project going in an Independent Media Alliance. Ladies and gentlemen, the Derrick Broze is with us.
Hey guys, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, definitely.
Sorry for getting the time zone mixed up.
It's Derrick.
I just came back from Mexico to the U.S. and my time zone's still messed up. But yeah, thanks for having me, man.
No, I mean, listen. Yeah, you not only are you a great investigative journalist, a great collaborator, a person who makes things happen. You boots on the ground. We saw each other last. That was the first time we actually saw each other in person. The Libertarian Convention. I think you were trying to chase down RFK. That Tulsi style, that way you got him that one question. You know, me and Matt, my friend Matt Weinglass from the Homeless Left. If you haven't met him, this is Derrick, Matt.
What's going on, Matt?
Great to meet you.
Good to meet you.
Yeah.
Not only in addition to all those things we just talked about, I don't know about the hip hop. I haven't heard you flow yet. You know,
I'll drop a song today. Don't worry.
All right. So other than that, I can just say that you're also a great stand-up guy. And I think that really helps when you are doing your shows, how you come across. I was watching your video when we get to talk about after we pick your brain a little bit on this Puff Daddy situation. But when you were doing the video on the UN Summit for the Future, you would kind of address it like, hey, who's remembering me talking about this? Anybody? Okay, I see a couple hands up there. I think that's very helpful because a lot of the information that I have kind of incorporated to, let's say, I don't want to say I'm more like definitely in the mainstream at all, but, you know, obviously I do a lot of appearances on Sputnik. I filled in for Jimmy Dore, Kim Iverson. So it might not be necessarily in the realm of where the truthers kind of hang out and speak. But a lot of the information from when I first had you on my show, you're like, I don't know what you want to call me, but I do seek the truth. It's so important. And I think it's a lot for people to digest, realizing that everything that's in front of them their whole lives, everything they've been taught from school is just a lie. It's a facade. There's something else going on. There is a man behind the curtain. And when you do that work, I think it's so amazing. I was watching just a little snippet, 2 minutes of Ian Davis just talking about, wait a second, instead of answering the question of what choice you have to take, look at the question itself. What are the choices they are giving you? And I think that's so important. And everything has changed a little bit from 9/11. But when the Epstein saga came into the mainstream, I think a lot of people were jolted and realized, hold on a second, there's more than meets the eye that's going on behind the scenes. And I think that you are such an advocate of bringing that to a bigger audience. And that's why I think it's so important to talk to you about this whole Puff Daddy situation. Thank you for joining the show with all that mouthful. If you'd like to respond.
I appreciate the kind words, brother. Thank you for having me on again. And yeah, I've been kind of catching up with some of the P. Diddy stuff. I've been following it the last couple of days and reading through the indictment. And there's definitely some interesting pieces there for sure.
So what does this mean for the macro when it comes to the P. Diddy situation? Because I think a lot of people, even though they kind of realize that Epstein was trafficking children and Ghislaine Maxwell was the first person that got charged for trafficking children, to nobody, right? In other words, at the end of the day, nobody on the client list, nobody got in trouble. What does this mean for P. Diddy? Is he not going to be protected by the elites anymore? Are they throwing him to the wolves? What does that mean? Is he going to take other people down with him? Does he have something to protect him? Please, Derrick, give us your insight.
So, I mean, my initial read of the situation, like I said, I was doing some more research, reading on the indictment, and then just started going a little bit down the rabbit hole this morning. You know, there's a few things to take away. Of course, on the surface level, like you said, maybe some people are like, okay, who cares? He's a celebrity rapper from the 90s. I could care less if he was involved in some shady stuff. Obviously, you know, everybody who's involved with things should be held accountable. What we know for sure at just the most basic level, based on the video that was released earlier this year, I think it was by CNN, showing him beating Cassie, Cassandra Ventura, the former R&B star, showing him like punching her and beating her. This guy's obviously guilty of abusing women, at least one woman. And there's many more accusations of that around him. So, I mean, that's on one basic level. And then we've, of course, seen the raiding of the houses earlier this year. And now we've actually got the indictment, and he turned himself in, and now he was denied bail twice this week, Tuesday and Wednesday. So I think the reason people should care, I mean, beyond maybe just, again, it's a celebrity, how does this affect me, is because of how connected he was. You know, I don't know if we can quite say this is Epstein level just yet, but I mean, there's definitely some circumstantial pieces of information. And again, the indictment references a few different pieces that we can cover. You can find numerous pictures with Sean Combs, Puff Daddy, P. Diddy, whatever, with Donald Trump, for example, obviously hanging out in New York City, not necessarily unusual. Those types of folks will rub elbows with each other eventually. But Puff Daddy was much more than just a hip hop mogul, as they like to refer to him as, because of Bad Boy Records, really connected to Suge Knight. And of course, there's been long-term rumors, conspiracies, however you want to put it, about his potential involvement with the murder of Tupac. And he also was very well connected to politicians and connected to, people in different influential areas, very much like Epstein. So there is that sort of kind of overlap, that he wasn't just isolated in his own hip hop world and did his thing there. Nobody else knew. This guy is doing business deals of all sorts and interacting with politicians, interacting with other moguls, other billionaires and folks of that kind. And of course, you have to ask questions about the kind of people who were close to him. I am a hip hop nerd, so I definitely kind of have a bit of the history in terms of his relationship with Jay-Z, friendships and alliances. Also, you can go back and there's videos that are still out there that are now a lot more interesting. For example, of the artist Usher talking about when he was like 13 or 14 and he first got into the music world and lived in Hollywood. He lived with P. Diddy for a year, and he's just talking about how it was a wild time. And I don't know if that means he was there for these freak off parties, as they're calling them. You can also go back to and find Justin Bieber in his first couple of years of his career at a very, very young age, and him hanging out with P. Diddy, and lots of weird, creepy videos of P. Diddy saying like, oh, Justin's under my control now. We're going to take him out on town. Maybe it's just innocent stuff. Maybe it's much more than that. Hopefully we will find out more, because I would hate for it to end up being a thing like with the Epstein case, where, as you mentioned, it's just Epstein. Okay, he killed himself. Whoops, that's over. Ghislaine Maxwell, okay, she goes to prison, and nobody else is implicated in any other way, because based on all the other pieces and some of the things I mentioned, plus the indictment, there's also, I would mention, what was this guy's name? Jonathan Odie. I don't know if you guys already touched on this, but this was this kind of crazy dude who went to this hotel, I think it was the Doral Hotel, and started firing off guns, and got arrested. And you can find his interrogation video on YouTube, where this guy, he doesn't sound very stable. Let's just say that, right? Doesn't mean what he's saying isn't true, but he's kind of all over the place. But he does make specific references to working for P. Diddy, and he talks about this lawyer who worked for Bad Boy Records, who also worked for Hillary Clinton, Ben Messias, who also worked with Colin Kaepernick. I mean, you start to see that there might be a lot more to this than what we're being told. Jonathan Odie is just one piece. Again, not the most credible witness maybe at this point, but he's definitely talking about sex parties at that point, talking about how he was being paid to be a sex slave and to just do all kinds of stuff. The indictment talks about finding like hundreds of bottles of lubricant and pills and towels, and paying hotels to let them do whatever they want and paying them to clean things up. It also specifically mentions a victim eye that references that these parties were being recorded like Epstein, and that those tapes were being used to try to blackmail people and to extort them and to continue further abuse. So there's absolutely some parallels here with the Epstein case. And I think that I hope that it doesn't just become a TMZ story or just something like that, because it's celebrities. And like I said, people maybe if you're not in celebrity culture, then it's not really like, okay, this doesn't matter. Like, there's genocides going on. I'm trying to pay for my milk today. Who cares about what P. Diddy's up to? I think we should all care about child abuse. This is something I've reported on for a long time, whether it's coming from a celebrity, Kevin Spacey, or some other person. It's all wrong. And obviously innocent until proven guilty. But the evidence is starting to pile up and looking like he was involved in what they're calling the Combs enterprise, that this wasn't just, a few people and he had some prostitutes. Like, this was a full-on operation with paid staff and cooks and people who, kind of like Epstein, probably knew what was going on. You have to remember, with Epstein, it was the butler who originally leaked the black book, and there's staff and all kinds of people involved that mostly have stayed quiet, but some have spoken up now since then. So I think this is definitely just the beginning of opening up a big can of worms.
I look at the list that Matt just put up not too long about people who have stepped down since this whole last arrest. And there have been like city council members in New Jersey and mayors and other stats. It seems like people outside of the music entertainment industry that might be connected to P. Diddy or Sean Buffy Combs. I look at that racketeering conspiracy charge. Now, I know you might not want to hear this, and you probably suspect this, but there are people out there, Derrick Broze, who are giving credit to Donald Trump for some of the executive orders he signed for bringing justice at the hands of P. Diddy. We've seen before, and I'm sure you've seen throughout your work, there have been maybe sheriffs or people who outside of power of the power mechanism that have made charges and arrests. Surely when it comes to Epstein back in the days, there were people in Florida who made arrests for Epstein that were eventually told. I can't remember who the prosecutor, the DA was in Florida, but I think it was once asked a question were you told that Epstein's above your pay rate and to let it go? And he goes, I won't answer that question. And there was obviously some sense of either sheriffs or people, I don't want to say white hats, but somebody making some arrest of trying to bring justice and protecting children. Do you sense some of that going on right now here, or is this more or less one of those plots that Ian Davis would tell us, be careful where they're bringing you because they're trying to mislead you to hide what's really going on? Do you sense some of that going on with the racketeering charge, the conspiracy racketeering charge, that there are some good people out there doing some good work and maybe trying to shine a light on this, or are they just trying to distract us and bring us away from the people who are really responsible for what happened in Puff Daddy's situation?
It could be a combination of both. I haven't seen the sort of let's give credit to Trump thing, which, give credit whoever the heck you want to. I think it's weird for me just to see that flex when the Trump supporters immediately something happens like, look, Trump did this. I actually have a video from a couple years ago on the consciousresistance.com, somewhat related to this, because one of the things you often hear from Trump supporters is that under his administration, human trafficking was pursued in a way that we never saw it. Yes, he did pass some executive orders, but when you actually look at the numbers, arrests were made, but there's nothing that's substantially higher than previous administrations or something like that. So there's still a lot of people carrying around false information, thinking that it's true. And some of this does go back to the QAnon psyop, or at least I consider it to be a psyop. Trying to say that, Trump, it was responsible for Epstein. Trump was responsible for the Nexium cult. Trump was responsible for, what are the other ones we saw? There's a few others that happened in the last 5 or 6 years. Now, anybody who knows Trump's personality, this guy likes to brag about things. If he had a hand in Epstein's prosecution, I'm pretty sure he would be making that his number one thing. Instead, even to this day, like just weeks ago, when he's asked about Epstein's client list and releasing it, he's still kind of, we'll see. We don't want to harm anybody by releasing it, this and that. Take that however you will. So I'm pretty skeptical of these claims that it has anything to do with him. But in terms of the idea of there being good people within these law enforcement agencies or U.S. government agencies, of course there's going to be good people. I don't think it's as simplistic and cartoonist as like every single employee of every agency of every government is corrupted within, is working against the people. Whistleblowers do happen, but there's also, of course, a lot of people who just go along with those systems and keep quiet. You mentioned Alex Acosta. He's the one who was definitely back in Florida involved with the Epstein thing. But there were cops, even when the cover up was happening in the terms of Epstein in the early days, there was also cops. I think Michael Ryder is one of the early cops who did speak up and were trying to say, like, there's something going on here. I've covered this in the Finders case as well. I think I've come on your show to talk about Utah ritual abuse case, which is ongoing right now with local county sheriffs in Utah. So there are cops and individuals who will step up to the plate and say, hey, there's something happening here. We need to go after it. And I do think they will occasionally, as we've found in other cases, run up against people maybe above them or other institutions who step in and say, hey, this is now our domain. And cases get squashed all the time like that. And we probably never even hear about them because they don't make it to the indictment phase. So for one reason or another, though, this one has made it to the indictment phase. And it's important for people to understand, too, that when we hear about or see an arrest or something like this, it didn't just start last week. They didn't just, all of a sudden launch an investigation a couple of days ago and then decide to, go after Puff Daddy. This thing has been years in the works. And the same thing with Epstein. So Epstein's arrest, 2019, the investigation was going on pretty much since 2005 with the first initial arrest. And then once he got the sweetheart deal, Bradley Edwards starts working with the victims, and they were doing that for a decade plus to get to that point. So I think sometimes on the internet, people just like, oh, it just happened. That now let me give credit to whoever's in office or who this thing or that thing. But it's a bit more complicated than that. They have to build a case, and I think Puff Daddy more than likely knew, obviously once the houses were raided, but probably even prior to that, knew that he was under investigation, because what happens is the cops start calling people in your life. They start visiting people and interviewing people, and your friends say, hey man, the FBI came to my house today and they're asking questions about you. You start to get the picture that you are under investigation, that something's going on. And I think more people than we might realize knew about this too, because two things I'll mention just briefly, again, kind of related to the hip hop community, to to that space. Cat Williams, who runs in some of those same circles, he's got that infamous interview now with Shannon Sharp saying whether you're P Daddy or whatever, this is going to be the year. But you can even go back and if you've been following 50 Cent, he has a huge amount of hatred for P Diddy, and I don't know what that's about, if it's just hip hop stuff, but he's been calling this out like for months. And in fact, he was everybody thought it was a joke at first, but he was posting on Instagram like a meme saying about I'm making a documentary about Diddy, and then now it was announced that like nope, he actually is doing this with Netflix. And so there seems to be people who knew what was going on, but like with Epstein and other cases, for one reason or another, people either just look the other way, and that could be because they're involved or just because they don't want to get involved. And so they're just like, yeah, I know Diddy, I heard rumors he's got crazy parties, but I'm just going to mind my own business. Well, I think that's over now. And a lot of people who knew about it or maybe participated probably are concerned like, oh shit, he was recording this. So we'll see what happens, I guess.
So Derrick, I like to do what you're saying as far as being a hip hop fan, and like I go back in time. I like to see the historical context, and we're looking at where this began. Like how did P Diddy get into this position of being able to have this type of power? So we look at like him being actually a very useful asset to the establishment, right? I mean, he was rubbing shoulders with even before Obama. I mean, he was doing this vote or die campaign way back in 2004. I mean, this guy was definitely a useful tool for the establishment to basically have a narrative that they wanted to put out to the youth. So he was definitely being used for that. So the fact that we're looking at these parties and it's like, wow, who knew this was happening, and nobody knew, and this guy just randomly was doing this. I'm trying to figure out where he was able to get this from. Like, how did he get? Was he trained to do this? I'm trying to see how he was able to function this way, because I think that the thing that sticks out to me is the part you're saying about the blackmailing and the tape recording. Like, that's not just something coming from, and I know the media can report this and make it out to be, oh, he just did this on his own, just something he liked to do. I think there was certainly something a little more nefarious above him going on here, and the people that he's protecting. So even though this case you're talking about that's been going on and like they're building the case, but maybe would you think maybe it's not so much about building a case, but that they were allowed to let this happen now that they've had this information? A lot of people have had this information, but maybe now is the time that they're allowed to release it, because there's a lot of people that we probably won't hear any names mentioned that are above him in this. Do you think there's something to that, or is this is he the guy at the top of this pyramid that put this whole thing together and the whole thing's coming down?
I would highly doubt that he's the top of the pyramid for this particular operation. I haven't done any searching myself at the moment, but I would encourage anybody, maybe you guys have already looked into it, but has he been to Israel? Has he visited Israel? Has he know anybody from the IDF? Does he know anybody from Unit 8200, Unit 81, things like that? And realistically, I mean, Israel and a lot of the intelligence agencies are highly connected and have been for a long time to Hollywood and to the music industry. So I wouldn't be surprised if we can find some connections there. I mean, I know he worked with Clive Davis. Obviously, he worked with Suge Knight. These are definitely criminally minded people. But often the case, as with Epstein, like in the beginning, of course, the whole narrative was, oh, Epstein's this really wealthy billionaire, and then once more information come out, we realized he actually wasn't even a billionaire. And where did this money come from in the first place? Oh, he's got connections to Les Wexner, and Les Wexner's connected to the mega group, and they're connected to the Zionist lobby and things like that. So I would suspect that perhaps he was being used by some people, or maybe this was some type of honeypot, or as you were kind of touching on there a moment ago, maybe he was allowed to do these things for a certain point and for some goal that maybe we'll never be privy to. Whenever the feds work with somebody, especially if they're involved in criminal activity, it's not hard to catch somebody, bring them in for questioning, and then basically get them to become an informant of some kind. There could be something to do with that. That could go all the way back to the 90s. It could have to do with all the things, the drug dealing and things that Bad Boy Records and Death Row Records were accused of back then. As I said, some of that goes into the whole conspiracy around Tupac's death and even Biggie's death. Mm-hmm. And that could have been some of the time whenever the cops could have got involved, or the FBI or somebody else, so perhaps he went from being a suspect of some kind to being a useful asset. But as typically happens with these things, eventually assets and formats, they lose their relevancy and their purpose. And maybe the case was building up against Puff Daddy, and of course I'm speculating here at this point. But let's say like when the video came out and it's like, okay, it's public now. This guy is a woman abuser. It's going to be hard to dismiss these lawsuits, because the lawsuits have been building up for a couple of years as well. Like this did just happen out of nowhere. Lawsuits and claims against him have been building up. They've been mostly ignored, but now they've got to the point where they're being taken seriously. When I was doing my reporting on the Finders cult, the lead man of the Finders cult is a man named Marion Petty, and he has a very interesting background that started with being in naval intelligence, and then allegedly he left the naval intelligence and just became a chauffeur, and then was a chauffeur for all these really well-connected military officers and presidents and all kinds of people, and then allegedly retires and just goes and starts a cult called the Finders, and it's all these weird, quirky things. But there's definitely evidence, as I've shown in my documentary about the Finders, that they were still connected to the Foreign Counterintelligence Agency, the CIA. The investigation that later came out against the Finders in the 80s was taken over by the CIA. They said it became an internal CIA matter. And there's pretty strong evidence that Marion Petty was a non-official undercover. And it's, from what I've read, as far as espionage, when a knock is discovered or something goes wrong, they disavow them. It's kind of like the whole Mission Impossible. If you're discovered, we're going to disavow any knowledge of your activity. It could be something like that. Somebody's useful only until they're no longer useful. And then after that, you cut them loose. And then, if they go to prison or whatever, that's no longer your business. Now, would Puff Daddy choose to say any of that if he's involved in something deeper, if he's working with other people? I think that's the other concern too. And of course, that's how we got to the point of Epstein killing himself.
It's when they no longer need you. Then you're better off dead in their eyes, I think, because they don't want you spilling the beans. Let's get to the last part, because we have about 10, 15 minutes left of this interview before we get our next guest on. You are going to New York, I believe, very soon to cover and this is what independent media is all about. One thing I love about Derrick Broze, boots on the grounds all the time. You're going to New York. It's the summit. We can throw the tweet up over here. Derrick Broze is going to the UN Summit of the Future, which starts this weekend, and he's going to cover it. And you can see down below, if we can scroll on up, the conscious resistance. I encourage everybody to go and take a look at that. There's an article, but there's also a video, and you can watch the video. It's pretty cool. Derrick, tell us why the UN Summit for the Future is, in your opinion, in your mind, an attempt to create an authoritarian global governance that wants to strip us of our national sovereignty. And when I say from us, I mean us, the stakeholders. Please explain.
Sure. So, even that introduction, that might sound extreme for some people who are not familiar maybe with the efforts to create one world government, global government. They don't like to use those terms anymore. They prefer multilateralism, global governance schemes, things like that. But if you paid attention during COVID and you saw many of the moves push towards digital IDs, and you heard about the Great Reset agenda, or what Klaus Schwab calls the Fourth Industrial Revolution, this is very similar to that with the new packaging. And just sort of a little bit of background on this, in 2020, when COVID was starting, it was also the 75th anniversary of the United Nations. And the UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres called for a report from the member states. He said, look, we're falling behind the Sustainable Development Goals and the 2030 Agenda. We're not going to complete our efforts to push towards transforming the world by 2030 unless we really get our stuff together. And so this resulted in a report called Our Common Agenda. And then the Our Common Agenda report resulted in the 2023 SDG Summit, and then also called for a Summit of the Future where all 193 member states of the UN would sign what they're calling the Pact for the Future. So this has been building up for a couple of years. It's really still not getting much coverage at all, even in, I'd say, the corporate media, other than just NGOs and people who kind of pay attention to the UN are focused on it. It's happening this weekend. It's part of the larger UN Annual General Assembly Week, which has just begun in New York City at the UN headquarters. As you mentioned, I'm flying there first thing in the morning. I was a little bit late here besides the time zone because I was writing my latest article on the Summit of the Future and the Pact for the Future. So the biggest concern that I've had for months now, for really the last year that I've been trying to raise awareness about this, is that the United Nations and the organizations they work with, including the Rockefeller Foundation, the Gates Foundation, obviously the World Economic Forum. I mean, this weekend is a big kind of, I guess, moment for the internationalist, globalist set who would prefer to have a centralized organization at the top of the world making decisions because, in their words, national sovereignty is no longer fit for the crises that we're facing. The World Economic Forum likes to call it the poly crisis. We're facing climate crisis. We're facing war, famine, pandemics, et cetera, et cetera. And all of these things prove that nation states can no longer handle, what we're facing as a planet. And thus the answer is to empower the UN and, in fact, remake the UN. There's lots of discussions about invoking the UN Charter to create what they're calling UN 2.0. And this is all kind of packaged into this Summit of the Future. Now, the Summit of the Future, as I said, includes the Pact for the Future. There's also going to be two other documents that they're planning to sign. One's called the Global Digital Compact. The other one's called the Declaration for the Future Generations. Now, on the surface, all of these things, the buzzwords they use, and they talk about inclusivity and diversity and equity, sustainability, I don't believe they actually use those terms in the same way that most of us mean them. Ultimately, what they describe is a world that doesn't consult the individual, let alone the nations. And I'm not a nationalist here or anything like that, but I definitely know that the further away the power is from you, from local to state, national, all the way to being at the UN, it's much more difficult to get remedies for the problems you have and to hold the people accountable. And in this case, none of us even elected the UN officials. So, I think it creates some problematic situations here for representation. But the Pact for the Future, it has up until this latest version. This is what my new article is about. We just got the 4th version of it. We still haven't seen the final version. This thing starts Sunday, and the public still hasn't seen the final version of it. But as of the 4th version, which was released about 5 days ago, it has changed somewhat, but I want to tell you guys what the previous versions have included because I have a feeling it might be back in there. It has specifically included languages for what they're calling emergency platforms. And basically what the UN is saying, again, we're facing crises in all these different ways, and we're facing complex global shocks, and that these global shocks necessitate international cooperation and coming together, making UN 2.0. And they say, if we face one of these complex shocks, which shocks multiple regions of the world, then the UN should invoke an emergency platform. Now, they promise that the emergency platform won't be a standing institution. It won't be a standing body. It won't, it's not going to override national sovereignty, which I think they put that language in there because there was so much resistance to the WHO's pandemic agreement a few months back. This document basically repackages the pandemic agreement and puts it in the form of this Pact for the Future. So up until this latest version, the 4th version, which just came out a couple days ago, every single version has included language about these emergency platforms. It is also included, and the current version includes language about remaking the financial infrastructure of the world. They keep talking about it's time for a new Bretton Woods moment. Bretton Woods is, of course, the post-World War II creation of the International Monetary Fund and the World Bank, institutions which have, of course, been used to rob third world developing nations by placing them in debt. Confessions of an Economic Hitman outlines this perfectly. These are called multilateral development banks. Well, the UN Pact for the Future is basically saying we need to empower these multilateral development banks even more. We need debt for nature swaps. We need to create financial infrastructure to create a nature-based economy. Again, lots of buzzwords, debt for nature swaps. So we'll take away some of your debt if you start conserving nature. But of course, if you default on that, then we get to take those resources. There's all sorts of funny mechanisms that they're promoting, and they're promoting them as if they're going to be the savior of the planet. And this, ultimately, this might just be another UN meeting and a long succession of UN meetings that don't really go anywhere, but they are all marching in the same direction. And they're definitely pumping it up as if this is a moment. This is our moment to really reignite the push towards sustainable development goals and Agenda 2030 within the next couple of years, to inject new financial cash, to remake the UN, to remake the financial architecture. And the roots of many of these calls go back to the Club of Rome, and we don't have time to really get too deep into that today, but I encourage people to check out my references to them in my articles at thelastamericanvagabond.com or my videos at theconsciousresistance.com. The Club of Rome has been calling for a declaration of a planetary emergency since at least 2019, and those same calls are now echoed in this Pact for the Future. ultimately, I believe, and I think the evidence shows, the data shows that this is a power grab, and it's a corporate power grab, and they can wrap it in as many buzzwords and nice language as they like. But at the end of the day, it's not going to do anything that does, as you said earlier, we're the stakeholders, right? I don't think any of us have been consulted. Any of us have been, asked our opinions or views about this. Yet here they go. They're going to sign a pact for the future, claiming that this is for all of us. So I was, lucky enough to get access to the action days. They're doing action days starting tomorrow and Saturday. The actual pact signing will be Sunday morning, and then Monday. Those are the 2 days of the Summit of the Future. I'm going to be in there at least tomorrow and Saturday. I fly out first thing in the morning. I will be doing some live reporting on there. See if I can run into Klaus Schwab or somebody fun. Or
is Klaus going to be there?
I think he's going to be there. They haven't, and this is another thing, they haven't even released publicly the full lineup of speakers who are scheduled. We know the names of the talks and some of the things, but they're keeping a lot of it under wraps. And I think this is probably by design. This pact can be signed Sunday, and we are not even maybe going to see the final language until it's over and done. And then maybe we'll see some reporting from corporate media. By that point, it's too late to really do anything about it. But I will be in New York City. I know a few other activists who are coming from UK and the Switzerland. We're going to try to do what we can just to hold that space for everybody and do some reporting, maybe do a little bit of rallying and just try to talk to people. I don't expect a huge presence, but we're going to be out there trying to do what we can.
So last question before we get you out of here, because I really want to get a sense of where you think, I talked about how you in this video, and I encourage everybody, go to Derrick Broze's Twitter, go to this article. There is a video in there. I love the videos too as well. But you have this kind of style of sorts where it feels like you are sometimes teaching from a position that your watchers or your students are learning. Like the way you use the UN Summits video in that video you have against them, let them explain it to you and see how you feel. And I found myself screaming at the screen like, wait a minute a second, who are the leaders that you guys are speaking about? Oh wait, tell me more about this digital compact. Do you think there is a movement of people in the mainstream that are starting to get the bigger picture and are more curious and are even suspicious of the Great Reset and the Fourth Industrial Revolution, as well as these global organizations like the UN and the WHO and the WF who are orchestrating these summits?
I don't know if it's so much in the quote unquote mainstream or normies. And I don't mean that in a derogatory way. I just mean like average person going to work 50 hours a week, trying to live their life and feed their kids. I don't think most of them have any idea or maybe even care or concern with what's going on in the UN. And maybe they've heard the word the Great Reset a couple times, but even I would say in the movement of freedom lovers, truth movement, liberty movement, freedom movement, health freedom, whatever overlapping different movements you want to talk about, that a lot of people seem to have kind of quote unquote gone back to normal. Things aren't as threatening in your face as they were during the COVID years. There's other crises going on. And of course they matter. The things happening in Israel matter. The things happening in different places, those struggles do matter. But I do feel like there is less of a kind of cohesive resistance or pushback or awareness to those things. Like maybe people do know, oh yeah, Great Reset, Klaus Schwab, World Economic Forum, but I don't see as much attention being paid to the Summit of the Future and to other things like that. And more importantly, at least for me, I don't see people kind of thinking about, well, what is my 2030 going to look like? This is really what I try to focus on with my work is, yes, as a reporter, as a journalist, I'm going to go there. I'm going to document what they're talking about. I'm going to share it with my audience and hopefully inform people of, what they're talking about and how it impacts them. But ultimately, my message is we need to stop focusing on just watching the Klaus Schwabs of the world and obsessively, oh my God, look, they're talking about this week. Oh my God, they're doing this. But instead focus our energy on what we can do in our lives, what is our 2030 going to look like? What does 2030 and beyond look like? What is the world that we're actually trying to leave behind? And so I'll just mention this final thing, that the week after the Summit of the Future in the UK, after New York City, I'm flying to the UK. We're hosting what we're calling our Summit for Our Future. It's the People's Reset, formerly known as the Greater Reset. And it's 3 days. It's going to be free online for people to watch. There's going to be in-person audience, but it's going to be similarly to the things they talk about. But instead of the top-down technocratic perspective, we're coming from that grassroots, bottom-up perspective, talking about mental, physical, spiritual health, permaculture, growing your own food networks, building parallel networks, getting off big tech, organizing our communities. And I think that's really what excites me and gets me activated and excited the most. So if people are interested in that and want a little bit of solutions after we get past the UN Summit of the Future, you want to know more about what you can do, you can find out about that at thegreaterreset.org.
And that's interesting conversation too, Derek, because I know we don't have any time. We got to get everybody out here. We got a guest in the wings. But I think the disagreement I used to have with my my past partner, who I still stay in touch with, Steve Poikin, who's part of the new network, was aside from building parallel societies and systems that we need to do to just kind of opt out, I always had the belief that, hey, listen, that's just not good enough. This empire, this evil mechanism needs to have to be taken on, because even if you try to go and do other things, they're going to come after you. So we have to find a way that we can do both. How do we build a better society? But how do we get the boots off our necks from these demons that are trying to control us? And I know that's conversation for another time. Derrick Broze, please let everybody know where they can find you, because I don't know how much of an impact your work has made, but I am certainly sold on how much of an impact how important your information is to what's going on out there. And I'm going to continue to follow you and share your work out there. Please let everybody know.
Thank you, brother. Thanks both of you for having me on. My main website is theconsciousresistance.com. That's where my documentaries are, my books, my articles, essays, podcasts, etc. I'm a weekly writer at thelastamericanvagabond.com. Stay tuned. My article on the Summit of the Future is going to be published here any minute. And as I mentioned, thegreaterreset.org. If you want to check out my 17-part documentary series called The Pyramid of Power, that's at thepyramidofpower.net. Appreciate your time, guys.
Thanks, Derek. Awesome. Have a safe travel, buddy.
Appreciate you.
Awesome. Oh, well, he's there. He's going to be coming in soon. Matt, you going to stick around, or you got to take on off, buddy?
I can do a little more. What's the topic? Are we
Oh, it's a good topic. It's about independent media. Stay for a little bit really quickly. Let me just introduce them. Our next guest, you guys know him, ladies and gentlemen. Matt's going to stick around for as long as he can. He's been doing a long show. He's a producer of the Rebel Alliance Pacifica KPFK FM guy, executive producer of CPR News, radio newscast, news and commentary for the international media and geopolitics. Ladies and gentlemen, he makes a hell of a meatball, and he always serves Chianti with it. My good friend Don Debar is here.
What's up, you guys? How you doing?
Hey, Don. Hey, Don.
Oh, man.
Good to see you.
Oh, man, we got a lot to talk about. That was some crazy stuff, the P. Diddy stuff. Wow, Derrick Broze, I love his work. Don, we hear the argument from many independent journalists that state that, that they'll always make the claim that the State Department and guys like Antony Blinken are suppressing indie news out there in many cases, labeling it as a foreign state media for disinformation, as a way of the government to limit you, and the viewer's choice of information and control the narrative all at the same time, right? Like, it's all about, that's what they label RT. They're just trying to manipulate you. There's misinformation. So therefore we have to get rid of them. But I want to talk about maybe some of the good reasons, right, to keep RT around. RT has been recently deplatformed from Meta. They're taking it away from Instagram and Facebook. I believe it had close to 7 million followers. Aside from the reasons we always hear from independent media journalists, that this is about the state taking away your choices and having narrative management, tell me a good reason to keep RT around. I mean, all of us here, certainly do some collaboration with them. We go on Sputnik. I do. I go on Peter Lavelle's show. I just filled in for Rick Sanchez on the Rick Sanchez show from Manila Chan. I think there's some good reasons to keep RT around. Maybe you can give us your insight to a good reason why we should keep RT around in independent media as a whole. Go ahead.
It's such a complicated topic that seems to be handled so, simplistically by everyone. TV is a weird, particularly media generally, but TV in particular is a weird kind of, technology, art form, cultural. It's just it's a almost like a neural path between human beings. If you look at the society as like some sort of meta brain or something, it carries, information from one spot to another and in mass amounts, with a tremendous amount of research, technology, art, and history and things, many disciplines applied. The simple 30-second TV commercial, that'll have music and dance and visuals, animation, all these different things to sell like one simple idea repeatedly issued to, to think about leaving on like some nostalgia TV channel and listening to them sell medication to the dead and dying repeatedly. And this is like a web that connects all of us at a time. Well, first of all, it connects all of us much more thoroughly in many ways, including the number of people that can be connected and the traffic control that can be applied to the communications by someone, and just the sheer massive numbers of it. This comes at the same time that we are both, the most populous of our history as a species, and also in many ways the most alienated from each other. The traditions of the societies that grew up around the world, over the past 5,000-10,000 years, whatever, particularly over the last 500 or so, where you had heavy duty contact with European colonialism and whatnot. That sort of all of the indigenous cultures have been in one way or another severely impacted by this and changed. And at this point now, many, if I won't say most, but many are suffering like hyper symptoms of dissolution, of system failure, cultures that aren't suitable to the conditions that people are experiencing. And because the things that they're experiencing were imposed, either from the outside or by rapid succession of events, nothing really grew up to, help cope. There's not like a symbiotic relationship between people's cultures and the things that they have to deal with every day. So, in other words, we are more distant from each other individually, despite the fact that we might be in closest physical proximity, than we ever have been. And that's on the one hand. And on the other hand, substituting for our inability to talk, I'm going to use as a symbol 3 10-year-old kids sitting on a couch next to each other, sit there and wait for them to say a word to each other while they're sitting there doing this. That's a perfect symbol of the phenomenon I'm discussing here. At this moment, while we're most alienated, we're also most connected. And the difference in the communication systems when we are doing it directly or doing it through, technology, through cell phones and computers and television and media and everything else, is that on the one hand, what I say comes out of my head to the extent that, I have that ability, and you hear what comes out of my mouth. This other stuff is mediated. If you're sitting next to me, luck of the draw, or, whatever kind of luck you might consider that, you're going to hear the stuff I utter. If you're going to talk over the public communication system, you're going to be heard only when whoever is in charge of traffic control there says you're going to be heard. And that particular system, which is now our communications system, is where it's privately owned outright in the bulk of the Western world, and where it's funded or owned, quote unquote, or whatever, by other mechanisms, including formal state mechanisms. You still have the same issue. Who sits at the control of this? The idea that somehow Disney Corporation is much less of a threat to democracy than the Russian government or the Chinese government or the government of Venezuela or the government of Staten Island is absurd. It doesn't look at the nature of power. It doesn't look at the nature of these structures. It doesn't look at the history of the evolution of these things and how they interact and relate. And it doesn't look at the way communications have been used as social control mechanisms forever. The Catholic Church for 1,000 years, for example, was the repository of writing, of the Western records, basically. there are all kinds of examples of certain institutions that were agents of power in one fashion or another, having a monopoly on history, on philosophy, on opinion in general. Why were they burning witches at the stake 500 years ago? Why were who invented the word heretic? And how many people died with that, over a piece of wood or whatever on top of the hole they threw them in? We're looking at the same phenomenon, only in a like a hyperactive version of it, where instead of a couple of million people occupying, the British Isles or whatever, and then large chunks of the planet, relatively thinly populated and people getting along with plenty of resources and all of that. Now we're at a point where there's human beings just about everywhere you look. A lot of the planet was outside of the control of the powerful. And now much of it is under the control of the same elite. I don't know if it's most, but much. If you knocked over China and Russia and dissolved some of the more recently developed multilateral organizations, the Shanghai Cooperative Organization, the different groups in Latin America and elsewhere, there's a small group of people that dominate the entire planet. Certainly, you can see the expression of people, a small group of people, their will in these global institutions like the UN. You guys were talking about that before. It's even difficult to envision what those characters, and all of those little alphabet groups and whatever else, if they really are sitting around plotting, a takeover of the world. First assuming that they don't already have control of it, because I don't know how you would take it over without already having control or knowing who has it and having a plan to take it away from them. In a situation like that, of course, whoever controls the communications is going to have an advantage in that struggle. And certainly that struggle has been going on for as long as, people have been living together. And now, it's shaping up to where it might be a nuclear war that settles it. I mean, more so than in our history, I think.
Yeah,
so
which is completely ignored.
Well, that you would see this kind of, I don't know if you'd call it endgame yet, but really severe intolerance for diversity of opinion, and for, okay, to answer your question in a short answer and directly, if you imagine that an entity like RT or ABC or whatever can be the mouthpiece for the organs of power in a particular society, a particular political economy, whatever structure you want to lay them on. And let's say that this is true without abatement. See, this group of people here, they have these TV stations. This is what they use to pursue their goals. They use these devices for their propaganda to lay out their point of view in front of the world. If you have that as a condition for everyone, every one of those groups should be heard. If I'm sitting on the ground somewhere, anywhere, and I'm hoping for some sort of democratic input into what happens going forward, who's in the room? 193 countries? I want to hear their perspective of what they're doing from each and every one of them. Who wants to stop me from that and why? And that's what we're talking about here. If you look at the history of the development of media in the United States, we have Bernays and all these characters that are, part of our national heritage here. Look at the Telecommunications Acts in 33 and 96 and several modifications in between. They're models of reining in technology that could be used for democratic discourse to be rapidly and broadly expanded to stop it from happening right there at that time. In the first case, they had to stop radio stations from broadcasting without licenses. They said basically that we need a traffic cop. There's no licenses. Everybody broadcasts everywhere. You can't hear anything. So, okay, you would think the first thing you would do is look at the totality of the bandwidth and say, okay, from here to here, and then space between here for technical purposes, and then here to here, here to here. And you look at the full band and say, okay, this is what's available. We're going to find a way for everybody to have a crack at it. You can have a 6-month license, and then you go back into Potter. There's a lot of ways where you can do this democratically. It's not what they did. They ended up creating monopolies, practically state monopolies, but they were private corporation monopolies. They were fascist entities. You had the state mediating the economy on behalf of capital.
That's real fascism you're talking about. You're not talking about the neo-fascist and the racist term. You're talking about the state controlling the narrative of complete control. Put the question back up real quick, Jamie. Is that all you had to say about that? Don, there's a lot there to unpack, providing a lot of context to why they're doing things. I think the short answer was, if in fact there are stakeholders or nations that are involved, what's going on in a conversation that you want to hear from those other stakeholders, those other nations, on what they have to say, that's just as important as what we have to say. And when I say we, I mean our controlled mechanisms of government or whatever that's going on.
In a situation where our government, to the extent they're talking to us, because they're not talking to us much, we don't even know who our government really is, right?
Yeah.
Where our government is at war with Russia, and they have reasons and everything, they didn't really share them. I want to hear from Russia why they're at war with us. Why can't I? They're going to lie? Really? They're going to trick me? It seems like the guy that wants me to go to war without telling me why is the one that's doing the tricking.
Watch yourself, Don. Get yourself the platform. Matt, jump in here.
Yeah. No,
the water's warm.
This is how we've been conditioned, that information is dangerous. When we have to figure out how we can unlearn that concept and relearn that it's the withholding of information which is in fact dangerous. Not having access to information is what's dangerous. But they're really good at this, Don. I mean, you just mentioned Russia. I mean, like when we talk to people here in Hollywood, we talk to people about Russia and about like what Putin was up to, and they think, oh, he just woke up one day and wanted to take over the world in February of 2022. And they claim to have heard Putin's side, but they haven't. They've been also the other part of the trick is not only tricking us that that the information is going to be dangerous if we heard it. People are convinced that they've actually heard the information because there was a middleman who told them. They interpreted it for them. And so you don't actually, we're going to be the little cushion in between and tell you how bad Putin, is. And we're just going to interpret it. And then you're going to just know it without a doubt, he's bad. And that's it. We don't want Tucker to go over there and have a 2-hour interview. We don't want, so RT is bad, having any sort of discussion outside of how we can control it here. So I think we have to figure out a way to unlearn this idea that information is dangerous. I liked what you said earlier. It's the more people in the room. If there's 140, how many 40 people in a room, I want to hear what every single one of them has to say. Not having that access is what is dangerous. So that's my take on it. I don't know where we begin though. Do you have any thoughts on how we fix this problem, or is this something that they've just mastered at this point? They got this down to a T, and there's no way we can change people's mindset on this.
I mean, we're in an evolving legal, political, and it's looking even now, but perhaps a military situation across multiple fronts too. You have just in the background as they are parceling up the large platforms and fighting for control, consolidate control of them. You have, after, I've said the New York Times alone, for example, going back to 2017, has had a half dozen instances of featuring people calling for Trump to be assassinated without any recourse, retraction, anything. Elon Musk, apparently, after the second attempt on Trump's life the other day, the alleged assassination, how you want to refer to it, pointed out, like tongue-in-cheek in a way, but also interestingly, if you consider, the back game, like intelligence involvement, etc., that although they've tried twice now to kill Trump, how come nobody's trying to kill Biden? And to me, I hear a joke in that, like, is it because he's already dead, like brain dead? And if you include Harris in that, it's hard not to think somewhere in item 1, 2, or 3 that maybe the claim is that she's also brain dead already. But what's happened is that the Secret Service has referred this out for investigation, and they're looking at a prosecution. People are calling for a prosecution of Elon Musk.
Yeah, people are also calling for the prosecution against Hillary Clinton as well. I mean, that's the back and forth of the partisan politics that are played.
Well,
let me throw some stuff. I want to throw my little 2 cents on this,
right.
Don and Matt, because I want you to hear this. And thank you, Matt, for sticking around. You got to take off. I understand. Okay. Yeah. RT is a little bit different. You raised an interesting point that if our government, and we don't even know who they are, is claiming that the other side, our adversaries, enemies, however you want to look at them, are doing certain things, and then therefore we have to provide our information. Why? At the end of the day, we know what they want. They want to manufacture a war or a reason to go to war. That's what they always want. Our government is addicted to war. Or in this particular situation or another situation where they say they want to stop human rights abuses, therefore they get to report on X said government or nation state. Let me say this much. The reason why I think Americans should have the right to hear RT, the information that is usually being transcribed to the viewer from these political commentators themselves, right, really reflects, what their personal ideology is. In other words, I've been involved inside, production meetings before I was doing the Rick Sanchez show. I speak to Rachel Blevins on, a regular basis here and there. The people at Sputnik, the same thing. They're involved with the content that they are putting out there. I don't know how things are in the mainstream media. I don't know if it's all the producers who are producing the content, and they tell the political commentator or the personality what has to be said. That is not the case for a lot of the work that is being done in RT, at least from what I've witnessed. And RT is typically chosen anti-establishment, independent thinking media personalities that didn't play well in the mainstream media sandbox to host their shows. Rick Sanchez, Larry King, and even Ed Schultz. Ed Schultz got fired from MSNBC or quit MSNBC because they tried to silence them. He didn't get the chance to speak his mind. Therefore, he went over to RT where he can do that. The majority of those political commentators that RT then chooses, look at their responsibility as being that of the fourth estate. In other words, they look at themselves as holding dear to what they're doing. In other words, as a journalist, being the fourth estate, reporting on what the government's doing, bringing you the truth. Therefore, they kind of had this group of anti-war commentators, fill their programming for quite some time. I mentioned those names. When you have that type of mentality, when you have those type of people, right, that produce the ideology of their work, you're going to have an opinion that you don't get in the mainstream media, who are simply the stenographers, the propagandists of who controls and pays their bills. You know what I'm saying? In mainstream media, all the stakeholders there who produce all the content are tied into the war machine, who are tied into Big Pharma. They do their commercials all the time. So they're putting out the propaganda. It's different like that when it comes from RT. RT historically, and the people they have now working for them. I just worked with Rick Sanchez. You know, I've talked to Manila Chan. I've worked on the shows. I know Jamal Charles. I know Garmer and Wilmer. The type of content they are producing is really what the mainstream media was supposed to be, the fourth estate. That's what they've had over at RT. And if we take that away and we allow these, because it doesn't just it doesn't stop with them, right? It's RT today, it's whoever tomorrow. I mean, God only knows how many people they've taken down off YouTube, demonetized, censored. If we allow RT to go away without that opinion, from what you have said, from what I have said, that's really bad for the American people out there. That's a lack of information that they should be getting that they won't be able to get moving forward. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Look, first of all, I just want to be clear on something. What I did before was a simplification of it to illustrate the principle. And I think I said when I opened that the actual situation is much more complex. But to simplify it, if you concede the censors' argument that Russia's media is a propaganda voice of Russia's government, showing Russia's opinion, of its own actions in the world stage. And I said, if every country were exactly like that as well, I would insist that I hear each and every one of those countries' point of view, because the fact that they're advocating for their own position without mediation tells me that I'm going to learn something that I'm not going to learn by somebody else with whatever motivation they have telling me what these guys are doing. And of course, it's much more, complex than that. I've been working with RT among many others, but RT for 15 years maybe now.
Yeah.
The people, I've got friends there and elsewhere in Russian media that I've made over the last 20 years. I think some of the people with some of the highest integrity as journalists, as human beings, by the way, are there, and I've met there. I could go down a very long list, but I'm not going to do that in case I forget somebody or somebody's. And it's like that in just about every media grouping that I've, had the experience with over the last decades, with, I will say, the exception of corporate media in the United States. There are some people that I've had contact with over the years that I thought, pretty highly of them in terms of that. Here's somebody trying to do an honest job, taking what they think they know about the world and applying it to what they think they see, and trying to report to us honestly what's there. And they have their eyes and ears open and are, subject to having their minds changed if you can bring something to them there are people like that. Tucker Carlson was one of them. I did his show like in 2005, I think. And it was about, at the time I was trying to encourage Cindy Sheehan. This is when he's at MSNBC, trying to encourage Cindy Sheehan to come to New York and run in a senatorial primary against Hillary Clinton in 2006 to turn the Iraq war into a referendum, basically, to turn the U.S. Democratic Party primary for Senate in New York into a referendum on the Iraq war. In other words, let New York Democrats vote on how they feel about the war in Iraq, because everybody was denied that in 2004 when we got stuck with Kerry and he caved. So he was open to that. Of course, I understood that he was trying to take hits at Hillary Clinton. And of course, I understood that this was something that was kind of, fantastical or whatever, and that would make good TV. But also, he was open to it. I saw what they did what MSNBC did to Phil Donahue right around that time or shortly thereafter, because he had anti-war voices on when they were gearing up to do that war. Not a lot, but some, and they wouldn't tolerate it. So there were very few. The worst offenders, in other words, the worst offenders are right here. They're the highest paid ones, of course. They're the ones that make $5 and $10 and $20 million to read off a teleprompter stuff you wouldn't tell your kids because you'd be embarrassed if they think you were a moron.
Yeah. Yeah. It's funny because some of those people that you were talking about that had a good heart, that wanted to do well in mainstream media, ended up at RT. That's like, you know, and really, to say the truth, like, people, they have this thought process, and this is what's really bad about the tenant media stuff, right? I don't want to sit there and try to guess what the motives for Tim Cast and Benny Johnson and Dave Rubin and Lauren Chen are. For I participated in a debate with Lauren Chen in Austin, Texas, and the Ian Miles Chong guy, like, you know, but I don't know why in the world some people from that part of the neck of the woods, when it came to the Russian RT peeps, why they would fund this tenant media group. Because like I said, I'm not going to try to guess their motives, but they're partisan hacks that are, like, you know, as anti-communist as can be. Benny Johnson is just a Donald Trump guy. I mean, I don't know why they would do these things, but the thing that's really shameful of this is that a lot of people assume that every decision that is made at RT, Don, was made at the decision of Vladimir Putin, and he's directing every. I mean, this is the naivety what people think. And like I said, I can't get in the minds of the people who threw $10 million at these agitators, at these nimwits, half of them. I don't even, I suspect that there's a lot of bots promoting their shows and giving these artificial numbers, but I also suspect that there are people who are kind of inclined to push the divide and conquer tactic, that have the keys to the kingdom behind closed doors, that are also pushing these agitators. But the majority of the people that do come from RT and bear the brunt of the RT, that's another thing that's really sucks, that all these people they didn't put their neck out there like the Rachel Blevins and the Manila Chans and the Fiorella Isabels and wore that RT logo. It took the lumpings. These people got their money behind closed doors. But the majority of people who do the work at RT for quite some time, and yeah, there's been people who have left for disagreements, but they do believe in the fourth estate. Their message is that of exposing what the government is doing because of their duties of the fourth estate, bringing real journalism to us and giving us a different opinion other than the CIA, State Department controlled mainstream media we have. And that's a shame about what this tenant media situation has done. It has really muddied the waters, Don. Wouldn't you agree?
You know, I think, like I told you, my personal experience, it supports that. But I think that's irrelevant. All of it, really. I think the relevant part is that we, as people trying to, uncover what's going on around us, to understand what's going on around us, we have an obligation to ourselves to insist that we're able to look under every rug and behind every door and any goddamn place we want to put our eyes and examine what we're looking at and challenge it. And we want people who will do that. Now, it may well be that somebody who is going to challenge someone that I am challenging has their own motives for doing it, and they might be even at odds with mine. So be it. When it's time for me to ask somebody for answers they don't want to give me, if somebody gets online next to me and demands the same thing, step right up. I'm a big boy. I can handle the next step and the next step after that.
Let's close the show the last 10 minutes because we know you got to get out of here with bombs and beepers. I didn't get a chance to watch your latest show. We had this, I call it bombs and beepers because they were like pagers. They weren't like, Hezbollah members weren't using smartphones from what I understand because they knew it was an easy way to get tracked and traced. But I'm assuming, and I don't know, that other people would use these devices that were blown up, that these little micro explosive devices that were set up. And I mean, hearing some of the people that the pro-Israel propagandists or useful idiots, as I like to call them, in all over the social medias, bragging about this. Can you give us a little insight to what you think and what this means to this beeper attack in Lebanon? I mean, I've heard so many stories like they caught the stuff on the production line. I heard at first it was a Japanese company. Then I heard it was a Taiwanese company. Then I heard they intercepted a shipment. I've heard so many different things. Give us a little insight to what you think exactly happened and what this means moving forward.
Well, okay. In terms of the technology, I don't know. People remember beepers. I mean, I'm older than a good part of your audience probably, so when I was in my 20s, early mid 20s, these pocket pagers became all the rage. There were ways. It was a way of tethering people into the office, basically, even when they were out. It would be, you have this thing in your pocket. It goes beep 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 beep. You have to take it out of your pocket and look at it. If it was a really, bells and whistles one, there was a phone number there that you're supposed to call. If it wasn't, the fact that it beeped meant call your office or mommy or whoever. And so they used these. There were networks that were set up that were sort of, in terms of developing a communications infrastructure. They were sort of like a proto cell phone network. Not exactly, but there are areas in the world where these networks still exist, where they haven't constructed yet the cell phone networks. And there are also areas where these beeper networks exist that I strongly suspect were like moved from other places in the world where they had been used already in order to provide coverage until straight cell phone coverage is provided to these areas. There's an awful lot, people don't know, there's an awful lot of this planet that's still not, under that signal.
They got 8-track somewhere, Don?
Say, yeah, great. So apparently someone, it obviously is something very easy to hack. It's, if people can hack my cell phone and make transfers from my bank account to theirs, making my beeper do something is a relatively simple task, especially just making it beep, because all you're doing in essence is sending a signal to whatever the sound chip is or the speaker is, and hitting it with some micro voltage or whatever. If you instead have that beeper hooked up to, I don't know, some kind of plastic explosives or some toxic gas or whatever kind of Mission Impossible fantasy you want to devise, then all you do is you call them on the phone and it blows up or the gas goes off or whatever. So apparently through some mechanism that, I've seen theories about, this manufacturer, that CIA, Mossad, this whomever, Hezbollah members or others in Lebanon ended up with a bunch of these beepers, and apparently one day, Tuesday, I think of this week, somebody dialed M for murder into them, and it blew up. Like 37 people dead, something like 3,000 people seriously injured. And then a day later, another, even older means of communication, what they called back when I was a kid and screaming in my parents' ear, I wanted a pair, walkie-talkies, which is a two-way radio. Looks like kind of like a cell phone, only thicker, has an antenna that comes out the top like this. You squeeze it, like that. Well, they use these for communications, I assume, military applications here, because, again, they say the Hezbollah was the target of the victim. And on Wednesday, there was an incident that involved, again, a massive number of these things being set off. And again, they refer to the fact that there was recently an acquisition of a large number of these on behalf of someone in Lebanon or having something to do with some of the groups there. So what it means is that all of those paranoid delusions that we were told we have about, oh my God, I'm afraid of having my TV, spy on me and my toaster, and
Yeah.
all of this stuff. The stuff they used to drag your cousin into the psych hospital and pump her full of Thorazine every 6 months or so, now is actually true.
Yeah.
And so, first of all, what that means for the mental health of people who are actual dissidents and aware of it, that these people that you're fighting now, they can blow up your cell phone in your pocket or your TV set or your microwave or whatever the hell they want. Yeah, I'm watching them paint the stripes because they're taking inventory and upgrading some of the gas lines for the utility where I am. And so they're sort of laying out a visual grid for the workers to do the work. And I'm saying to myself, if you were looking at this with like dual use purposes, you could be laying out a grid also for, okay, well, somebody sitting in a room somewhere could every now and then say, okay, whose house are we going to blow up today? And push a button, and number 3807 goes, blam. I mean, there's such an intrusion into our lives, into our spaces of technology that is very powerful, that transmits all kinds of information on a constant basis, that is entirely outside of our control, and is inside the control of people who are making and have been making a grab for power unprecedented in human history. It looks scary because it is scary. And so that's all I can say about it. I don't know any more than anyone else.
Yeah, it's I mean, well, I'd like to always reflect and look upon the fact that the way you hear people like, the mainstream media on the right, whether it be Ben Shapiro, the New York Post, Ben Shapiro's out there saying that this is one of the most pinpoint anti-terrorism operation ever to be pulled out, ignoring that there's a 9-year-old girl who died, a 10-year-old boy who died, the civilians. And we know it's like a drone warfare. The one thing we do know, it's not going to be accurate. It's going to kill civilians, and they don't care. Israel has never cared. The Haya doctrine. Hamas is using these people as human shields, so it's okay to kill them. Same thing over here. And anything that the empire does abroad will eventually be brought home done to us. The chickens will come home to roost. They are calling us domestic terrorists now. I mean, it's crazy. And this is mostly the right bragging about this. There were Denise DeSouza, another Trump surrogate, was saying how awesome this was, that it's okay to laugh. Michael Rappaport on the left, laughing, beep, beep, ha, 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 laughing. I mean, and I think Gerald Celente said it best in his tweet. If the IDF can do this with beepers and walkie-talkies, imagine what the NSA could do with your cell phone and your smartphone, pal. You better be careful about this. This is terrorism at another level. Don, let everybody know where they can find you. Get out of here and go have some San Gennaro.
Yeah. I am sort of sleeping on Facebook right now because of their deplatforming of RT. You can see me on Twitter or x.com, whatever handle you want to use for it, at Don Debar, just like at the bottom of the screen here. Also, I have a YouTube page, Don Debar, spelled the way my name is spelled in the plate, and a whole bunch of other stuff. Press TV, I'm doing once or twice a week, and a couple other media outlets.
It's going to stink if these outlets get deplatformed. I haven't been doing as much as my shows. I've been doing their shows. Just was in South Florida doing Rick Sanchez show. Awesome stuff, awesome work, fun stuff. Yeah. Love their point of view. It's all independent thinkers. I think you should know, too, Antony Blinken just declared African stream Russian propaganda. So watch for my good friend, Ahmed Cabello, who I know is not part of the Russians. I met him in the elections in Nicaragua several years ago. He's a great guy. He started with a few other people, African Stream. It's some amazing work, but look for them to deplatform other outlets too as well under the name
I bet you,
National Security.
I bet you there are a lot more people in Africa who would like to deplatform Antony Blinken for being modern day uber white supremacist, imperialist pig.
Yeah.
Than want to deplatform anyone having anything to do with RT.
This ain't going to stop. This is scary now because this is a big chunk of independent media that they're trying to take away the voices from. And there's not a lot of money, as you can see. Like, you look at our numbers on YouTube today. Of course, we can always look at ourselves and say, what can we do better? How can we produce a better show? How can we be better communicators? But it's obvious that they have really suppressed certain channels from the inside out, and without a transparent open source algorithm, open source network where we can see how the algorithm works, we'll always be subjected to what the ruling class wants people to hear. Don Debar, thank you so much for coming on the show today. Have a great time. We'll see you soon.
The same, brother.
Thank you, brother. Ladies and gentlemen, that is it for today. That is our show. Thank you so much for watching. Jamie, are you there? Please. Thank you so much for watching. Guys, you can find out all the ways to help out the show are in the links below. Please help us out. We're saving the world one meal at a time. But remember, right now, it is time for pasta to go. Unless, do we have any super chats or super rays or anything? Nothing? We're out. See you later. See you next time, guys. Thanks for watching, everybody.